You are listening the compilation of the most interesting Reddit stories. Let's dive into them. My husband, Matt, 35-year-old male, and his ex-wife, Laura, 33-year-old female, have been divorced for nearly 4 years now. They have a daughter named Sophie, 7F, and they share her custody. 2 years ago, when I, 32-year-old female, started dating my husband, I knew about his past marriage and daughter, and I had no problem with it. My husband and his ex were not quite friends with each other, but they maintained a healthy interaction for their daughter, which I always appreciated. Also, I have never had any problems with my husband's ex-wife on a personal level. We don't actually speak to each other that much, only during Sophie's pickups and drop-offs. Pleasantries only. Laura was working for a company that laid off many of its employees 3 months ago, and she was one of them. She didn't have much savings, so she started struggling just after 1 month of losing her job, and she was not even able to pay her monthly bills. Above all this, her landlords evicted her because she could not pay the apartment rent. For the last month, she has been living with one of her friends. I was completely oblivious to all of this until my husband told me about it recently. My husband was, of course, concerned about his daughter and her present-day living arrangements. He spoke to his ex-wife, who assured him that she was okay, but stressed since she was seeking for a new employment that has so far been elusive. And because of this, my husband was very anxious. My husband suggested to his ex-wife that their daughter came to stay with us until she is settled. I didn't have any problem with that because I always considered Sophie my child, and I was ready to anything to prevent that little girl from being anxious about anything. Last week came the real issue when my husband told me that his ex-wife wanted to move in with us. He told me that his ex-wife didn't have any place to go at that time. Her parents lived outside the state, and her friend could not host her anymore. As my husband put it, the assumption was that she was only going to live with us for a short period, most likely a month or 2 at most, as she would look for employment and make enough money to afford her own place. However, my husband said that we should give our upper portion, which was rented out, to his ex-wife because he didn't want their daughter to keep moving from place to place. The suggestion of my husband left me speechless. This is something I felt very uncomfortable about. Laura is his ex-wife, and although I know there is a child involved, there is no way I was keen on the idea of her staying in our house, especially when there was no timeline set to the request. A month could stretch to 2 or 3 months, and who knows how long after that. It is needless to say that I felt this was going to bring so much pressure in our relationship. I told my husband that I would not be comfortable with his ex-wife moving in with us. He appeared to be somewhat bereaved, but he said that he got the point. I thought that would be an end of it. But a few days down the line, Laura directly texted me thanking me in advance for opening our home to her and her daughter. I was surprised to get such messages from Laura, but I didn't want to argue with her, so I politely said that I understood her feelings, but was not comfortable with her staying in our house. I said that I would help her find cheap apartments or any shelters for families or single women where there was some space available. I even said that we could take care of Sophie until she was provided with the necessary help and got back on her feet, but we could not accommodate her in our house. That bit did not go well with her. Laura called me right away and was really angry. She called me selfish and said that I was not concerned about Sophie's welfare, and was also interfering in the co-parenting of her and my husband. She pointed to my jealousy and accused me of being insecure, like I can't cope with the sight of my husband with her. I was soft with my clarification, but she wouldn't listen to that. She hung the call immediately. Well, the situation is very different now. Everything is currently on the edge. My husband says that I am being an AH for being so rigid. I told him that I have my boundaries and that I would not let anyone step over them. Even my husband's mom says that I am an AH for not caring about the welfare of Sophie. I told her that I was not against Sophie moving in with us, but I didn't want my husband's ex-wife to move in with us, because it is bluntly unreasonable and a weird idea. How can I live under the same roof with my husband's ex-wife? I believe that I did the right thing by setting my boundaries, but all my in-laws' relatives have been painting me as an AH. So, am I the AH? OP is not an AH for setting boundaries. Though Laura is in a tough spot, OP and her husband are not responsible for her. She is being unreasonable and entitled. She should be grateful that OP is offering her to take care of her daughter until she gets a stable job, but she is over-demanding. So, she is a jerk, and I would give her 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets 0 out of 5. OP's husband is also a little bit an AH for agreeing to take in his ex-wife. So I would give him 0.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to another Am I the AH, where OP refused to lend her vintage car to her entitled cousin. I, 26-year-old female, have always been close to my extended family, but my relationship with my cousin Sarah, 28-year-old female, has always been complicated. We grew up together, spending summers at our grandpa's house, but she has always been jealous of me. In childhood, she was envious because I was the darling of my grandparents and my father's siblings, and the most popular girl in school. And now she is jealous of me because I am more successful in life, and childhood factor is also involved, I think. Whatever. I own a vintage car that I inherited from my grandfather when he passed away. This car is more than just a vehicle to me. It is a memory of him. He was the one who taught me how to drive, and we spent countless hours working on the car together in his garage. After his death, I have kept the car in pristine condition, only taking it out for special occasions like family anniversaries or significant milestones. It's not just a car, it's a deeply sentimental gift from my grandfather that I cherish. Last month, Sarah called me and asked if she could use my car as her wedding getaway vehicle. You know, the classic drive-off moment after the ceremony. I hesitated for a second because I knew how important this car was to me. So I told her that I would think about it. When I talked to my boyfriend about the situation, he advised me not to lend it out for such a big event. Weddings can be chaotic, and I wasn't sure I'd trust just anyone to drive it or handle it properly. Plus, there's always the risk of something happening, scratches, dents, or even an accident. The next day, I called my cousin and told her that while I want her wedding to be beautiful, I just couldn't let her use my car. I explained that it was a family heirloom, and I wasn't comfortable with it being used for the wedding, especially since I wouldn't have control over who drives it or how it's handled. I offered to help her find a similar car to rent for the day or assist in any other way I could. Well, Sarah did not take this well. She got quiet on the phone for a minute, and then she exploded, accusing me of being selfish and not caring about her big day. She said I was prioritizing a stupid car over her happiness, and that it was just a material object, not some sacred thing. She even went as far as to say that Grandpa would have wanted me to share it with family, and that I was disrespecting his memory by being so possessive over the car. I didn't know how to respond, so I just reiterated that I couldn't lend it out and hung up. Since then, my cousin has barely spoken to me, and I have not even get invitation to her wedding yet. The following day of my refusal, her mom called me and said that I was being unreasonable and that it is just a car and that family should come first. I told her that it might be just a car to her, but to me, it is not just a car. It is much more than that. My parents are somewhat on my side, but they've also suggested I should reconsider because it's a once-in-a-lifetime event for Sarah. Now, I am a little bit confused about whether I should lend her my car or not. So, am I the AH? OP is not the AH for refusing to lend her vintage car. While it's understandable that Sarah wants a special vehicle for her wedding, OP's car holds deep emotional value to her, and her refusal to lend it to Sarah is justifiable. So, I would give OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Sarah's continuous demand and calling OP an AH for her refusal is not justifiable, especially after OP gave a proper explanation of why she cannot lend her car. So, Sarah entitled and an AH, and I think she deserves around 1 out of 5 on the AH scale. The ultimate downfall of an arrogant and power abuser boss? I, 32-year-old female, never thought I had a vindictive bone in my body, more like a grin and bear it type. But there are times when life tests your patience, and you either break or bend. This is a story about how I bent over a long, protracted process, and how brought an arrogant and power abuser boss down to his knees. I landed a job at a marketing firm 7 years ago. Not my dream job, but it was relatively well-paying, and I was excited to finally find myself in a professional setting where I could prove myself. General manager of the firm was a man named Harold, around 55-year-old. He was charismatic, well-respected in the industry, and everyone loved him until they got to know him. He had that feeling where he would just command the room, make the clients laugh, and close the deals with ease. Within the first couple of months, I realized how Harold treated his staff women, in particular. Subtle ways of demeaning us, with offhand comments about appearance, or jokingly, telling us that we'd better be careful if we wanted to stay on, would drive me mad. He did it carefully enough to seem lighthearted, as if we were the ones being too sensitive. The few times people did complain, but all in vain. At first I kept my head down. I was new, and I didn't want to be an office agitator, so I made it a point to steer clear of it. It took on a whole different turn when he started singling me out. First, snide comments about the way I dressed. Trying to impress someone in the office? Or, you know this isn't a runway show, right? I just bit my tongue and swallowed it all until the day he pulled me aside after a meeting and said, "You have got potential, but maybe you should smile more." Clients respond better to women who aren't so serious. That was it. Right then, I knew that I wasn't imagining things. Harold was out to get me and people like me on purpose. Instead of quitting, I did something I never thought I would do. I started planning. I was in a position where directly taking him on was impossible, but I could wait. And as I waited, I watched. The thing that served Harold the best was, of course, his charm. But it was also his largest weakness. He was careless, overconfident, believing himself to be untouchable. I started collecting evidence. Inappropriate comments via email, instances in which he had taken credit for my work and others, comments in meetings that had crossed the line. I saved everything. I also made allies. Some women even had worse experiences than mine. Harold had pressured one woman to stay late for after-hours mentoring. Another had her promotion stalled because Harold didn't feel she was assertive enough. We clearly weren't dealing with a bad boss. We were dealing with one who was systematically abusing his power. It took 2 years to get everything together. Within that time, I listened and watched Harold act as if he was the king of the office, never once knowing that we were building a case against him. I knew we couldn't go directly to HR because Harold was a close friend of the head of HR, and complaints would mysteriously disappear. Now, we needed something concrete, something that would leave him with no way out. It finally came. Harold was angling for a major promotion within the company, a move that would make him one of the top executives, not just in our office, but over several branches. He started throwing his weight around even more than he did already, bragging about how the promotion was in the bag and how he soon would be running the show. He was in the middle of full campaign mode, shaking hands, promising the world, and putting on his best show. I, on the other hand, was quietly picking up the final pieces. During the final pitch for his promotion, Harold made a casual remark about one of the female executives present in the meeting. He said something to the effect that she was a real go-getter, especially with that skirt. He had thought he was funny, but the room fell silent. Little did he know, his fate was sealed. The female executive was really offended, and after hearing about the rumors about the case we had been building against Harold, she got in touch with me. She was hardly surprised. Word of Harold's character had preceded him, but she required proof. I handed her everything we had: the emails, the testimonies, the details of his mishandling of client accounts. Within a week, Harold's promotion was rescinded. The company began a formal investigation into his behavior, and it didn't take them long to find way more than enough to fire him. The news of his being fired spread like wildfire, and soon, Harold's name was poison within the industry. His arrogance and overconfidence cost him his job, his reputation, and I have heard that his wife has also left him. Last I heard, he was trying to get back into the business as a freelance consultant, but nobody in the industry will have anything to do with him. I never wanted to destroy the man's life. I only wanted to try and stop him from destroying ours. But sometimes, karma has other plans. It was truly a pro-revenge and was masterfully executed. Hats off to OP. OP's boss, who thought he was untouchable, was brought down like a paper house. These toxic and power-abusing bosses deserve this fate. I'm sure that OP's boss will never forget this downfall, and he will never treat any employee the same way anywhere else. Let's now move on to another story from r/am, 𝐒𝐓𝐻'𝐒, where OP's neighbor continuously demanded her to babysit her children. But OP finally refused, and this refusal created a huge scene. AITAH for telling my neighbor I am not a free babysitter. I, 29-year-old female, live in a pretty quiet suburban neighborhood in which socialization is at a minimum. We don't really have block parties or anything along those lines, which is honestly fine by me. I'm not super social, and with my job being one that allows me to work from home, I'm pretty happy with my own company. Recently, a couple moved into the house next door. They seemed nice enough at first, though I didn't really interact with them much beyond a polite hello now and then. They, Emma, 30F, and Henry, 38M, have 2 kids, around 7M and 5F. A few months after they moved in, Emma initiated conversations whenever we met. Casual questions like, "How's your job? You work from home, don't you?" And if I ever got to have a lot of free time. Initially, I thought nothing of it. I was simply being polite. But then it started becoming more pervasive and pointed like, "Oh, you have so much free time because you work from home." I would always laugh it off, like saying my job was actually pretty demanding. And just because I'm at home doesn't mean I have all this free time. Then one day she came to my door and asked if I could do her a huge favor. Her regular sitter had fallen through and she needed someone to watch her kids for a couple of hours. Since it was the first time she asked, I agreed. I thought it would help to build some good neighbor rapport. The kids arrived, and goodness gracious, they were something else. I don't know what Emma's version of a couple of hours means, but the 2 hours I signed up for became close to 5. For all that time, they had run across my house, screaming, spilling snacks everywhere, and refusing to listen to a word I said. I had work to accomplish, but I could not concentrate with the chaos in my house. When Emma came to collect them finally, she must have apologized a little and then said, "Thanks so much, you're a lifesaver." But she didn't. I just put it down to a once-off and didn't think much more about it. A week later, though, she asked via SMS if I could take care of the kids again. So this time, I said no because I had a meeting, which, in fact, I did. But then it just became routine. She was texting or knocking on my door every other day, every time with some excuse about why she couldn't watch her own kids, appointments, errands, emergencies, whatever. I first felt bad when I would say no, but after the 3rd or 4th time, it really started to feel like she was just taking advantage of me. I would say I had to study, even though I didn't, just so she wouldn't always ask. Then she became pushier. "Oh, it's just for a little bit," or "You're home anyway, what's the big deal?" The final straw came last week. I was in the middle of an important Zoom meeting for work when she started pounding on my door. I ignored it, thinking that she would take the hint. Nope. She continued knocking louder and louder. She even yelled through the door. I quickly muted my mic and opened the door a crack, telling her I was busy with work and couldn't help. She looked at me, imperturbable, and said, "It'll only be an hour. I just need to run out quickly. The kids are already in the car, so I'll bring them right in." I lost it. I said, "Emma, I'm not your free babysitter. I have a job. I'm working right now, and I've told you I'm not available. You need to find someone else." Her face reddened as she began to stutter, saying something like, "I didn't know you were so uptight," and "It's just an hour. You're home all day. What does it matter?" I stood my ground. I said, "It matters because I'm working, and even if I wasn't, it's not my responsibility to look after your kids. Please stop asking me." She glared at me and stormed off, dragging her kids out of the car and back into her house. Later that evening, I received a long passive-aggressive text from her about how she thought we were neighbors and supposed to help each other out, and how selfish and rude I was being. She said that I didn't know how it was to be a mom, and that it would not kill me to help out once in a while. I am feeling a bit sorry for her, but at the same time, I feel like she overstepped my boundaries by constantly expecting me to babysit her children just because I work from home. So, am I the here? OP is certainly not an AH for setting her boundaries. I don't understand why OP's neighbor was expecting so much from her when OP had refused to babysit her children multiple times. Working from home is not a joke. It is actually more demanding than on-site jobs, but people like OP's neighbor don't understand. So, OP standing up for herself is fully justified. I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. As for Emma, she is being too demanding and unreasonable, so I would give her 1.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. My daughter, Lily, 14-year-old female, has always had a passion for cooking. Ever since she was a kid, she would hang around the kitchen, watching us cook meals. For the last 2 years, my daughter has been experimenting with different recipes, watching cooking shows, and even reading cookbooks. She tells everyone she wants to be a professional chef one day. Initially, I thought it was great that my daughter had found something she loved. I even thought about enrolling her in a professional culinary course. However, I didn't tell her at that time, as I was waiting for the right moment to bring it up. Over time, my daughter got really good at making simple dishes like pasta, creamy potato salad, sloppy joes, cornbread, etc. My wife and I always appreciated what she cooked, but recently, things have started to get a bit out of hand. My daughter has become obsessed with making more complicated gourmet meals. It started with trying out fancy desserts and gradually escalated to full-course meals with ingredients I had never heard of. Now, she insists on cooking for the whole family at least twice a week. She even wants to participate in cooking for the extended family dinner, which we organize once a month. My daughter spends hours in the kitchen, and by the time she is done, the kitchen is a complete mess, and my wife and I end up spending an hour just cleaning up after her cooking session ends. While some of the meals she cooks turn out well and tasty, others are completely spoiled. We have had a couple of nights where the food was nearly inedible, and we had to eat out. What really pushed me over the edge was a dinner she made last week. She decided to cook a very complicated French dish that I cannot even pronounce. I think it was lièvre à la royale, or something like this. She insisted on going to a specialty store to buy ingredients, which cost us a small fortune. It took her 6 hours to prepare everything, and by the time it was ready, it was nearly 9 p.m., around 2 hours later than our dinner time. I thought it was okay, thinking that our daughter was learning to cook. But when I had the first mouthful, the meal was completely dry and tasteless. And to top it off, she forgot to make anything for her younger brother, who's a picky eater. I was so angry, but I controlled my anger and suggested to my daughter that she should not involve herself in these elaborate meals, and that I would pay for her to join a professional culinary course. For now, she should stop messing up in the kitchen. After hearing this, her mood changed. I then tried to change the topic and said, "Come help me clean up the kitchen," but she refused, saying she was tired and told me that she couldn't help. She behaved as if she was a professional cook, and I had insulted her by asking her to clean up the kitchen. I got furious and said, "Lily, you are not a chef, and you must help me clean up the kitchen. If you are really interested in learning to cook, you must join classes. Otherwise, you are not allowed to cook at home." My daughter said that she didn't need any classes because she already knew how to cook, and then she stormed off to her room. It has been 5 days since she has not talked to me. She hasn't cooked anything, and she hasn't gone near the kitchen. My wife thinks I was too harsh, and that I should have been more supportive. She says our daughter is just trying to follow her passion, and that cooking makes her happy. I get that, but we can't keep living in chaos every time she decides to cook, and it's getting out of control. I am not against her following her passion, but I want some normalcy in our lives. I want to have dinner on time. She's 14, and while it's great she loves cooking, there are limits. Now, I am confused about whether my behavior with my daughter was justifiable, or if I am wrong. I need some genuine advice. So, AITAH? OP is certainly not an AH here, and what he did was 100% justified. To be honest, it was not scolding, but rather OP was setting boundaries for family life. It is great that OP's daughter has found a passion at 14, and cooking is a really good profession. However, messing up the kitchen, refusing to clean up, and considering herself a professional cook without learning is not justifiable. So, OP's daughter deserved this mild scolding. So, I would give OP 0 out 5 on the A scale. Let's now move on to another story where OP's wife is adamant about spending money that OP's late wife had left for her children on her daughter. My 43-year-old male late wife, Olivia, passed away 10 years ago. After her death, I raised our 2 kids, Emma, 15F, and Jake, 12M, as a single father. During her lifetime, we maintained separate finances, but we also had a joint account for our household expenses. The money my wife had in her separate account was meant for our kids, though she never mentioned it, but it was implied so. 5 years ago, I remarried to my second wife, Laura, 38-year-old female. She has a daughter, Chloe, 15-year-old female, from her ex-husband. We also have a son, Ben, 4M, together. I always treated my stepdaughter as my real one, but from the start, I made it clear to my wife that the money my late wife had left was for Emma and Jake. My wife didn't say anything about it, and in fact, she was not supposed to. We were doing very well, and we never thought of using that money because we never needed it. However, for some time, things have been tight in the pocketbook due to inflation and children growing up. Now, it is a little bit harder to handle our finances. My stepdaughter has been in dancing, and she has been practicing for over 4 years. Now, she is passionate about her professional career. She wants to join dance classes that she and her mother say are really important for her career. However, the problem is that they are expensive, way more than what we could afford right now. My wife has been pushing me to use some of the money my late wife had left to cover my stepdaughter's dance classes, but I stood my ground, telling her that this money was for Emma and Jake, and not to spend it on other petty things in the household. However, my wife does not see things that way. She says that my late wife didn't leave any clear instructions about where to use the money she had left, so we can use it for family needs. I again told her that the money was not for family needs. It was only for Emma and Jake, and that they would get the money when they would turn 18. My wife got angry and said that I was prioritizing Jake and Emma over my stepdaughter and our son, Ben, and that I didn't consider my stepdaughter a part of the family. What really hurt was that I love my stepdaughter deeply, but I also feel deeply about honoring what I believe my late wife would want. I told my wife that this isn't about playing favorites or putting Emma and Jake on some pedestal. The reality is that I truly believe the money belongs to them, and I'm just holding it until they are ready to take control of it. My wife continues to tell me we can use the money now, then work on saving more for all the kids in the future, but to me, that feels wrong. Now, what happens when something unexpected happens, and Emma and Jake haven't got that safety net later? The last thing I would want would be to betray what Olivia would have wanted. Despite continuous insisting from my wife, I stood my ground and refused to use that money on my stepdaughter. I told her that I would not use that money on our biological son Ben, and even on myself. It was for Emma and Jake, so it must remain there until they turn 18. Because of my refusal, my wife is now angry with me, and she thinks that I don't care about her and her daughter. So, am I the AH here? OP is not an AH here because the money OP's late wife had left is clearly for Emma and Jake, and OP's stepdaughter has no right to it. OP's wife is being unreasonable in demanding the money that Emma and Jake's mom had saved for them. Additionally, Emma and Jake's welfare should not be considered less important than OP's stepdaughter's dance classes. OP's wife's demand is not justifiable. Therefore, OP is not an AH, and I would rate him 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, while OP's wife deserves 1.5 on the AH scale. I, 22-year-old female, have been friends with Emma, 23-year-old female, since high school. We have always been close to each other despite moving apart in life and career. For the last 2 years, Emma has been facing financial strain due to not having a stable job. During this time, I helped her out a few times by paying some of her bills and giving her small loans. I did all this out of our friendship. Some of the money I gave to Emma was meant to help her, but she was supposed to pay back the loans. It has been 2 years, and she does not have a stable job. She gets jobs, but resigns on one pretext or another. In the last 2 years, she has resigned from 4 jobs. Now, I have realized that Emma is not serious about holding a job and becoming self-sufficient. She seems to be a job hopper with a dependency on others. Initially, I thought she had only borrowed money from me, but recently, I learned that she has also borrowed from some of her other friends. I have come to the conclusion that I will not help her anymore because she rarely pays me back or even acknowledges the help. Last week, Emma reached out to me crying and said that she was behind on rent. She asked if I could lend her $500 to cover it. I sympathized, but I had just moved into my own apartment and had bills to pay. I told her that I couldn't give her the money, but I could help her search for jobs or work out a budget. She went quiet, then said she understood. I thought everything was fine. Later that night, I had come across Emma's Facebook post, something like, "Funny how the people closest to you can't help at the moment when you need it most. Guess money really shows who your true friends are." Only a few mutual friends were posting their 2 cents. I could tell it was generally towards me. I texted her asking if I could talk, but she didn't reply. When I called her, I found my number blocked, and she had also blocked me on all social media platforms. 2 days later, I came across a mutual friend of ours, Sarah. Sarah said that Emma felt I abandoned her because I did not prioritize our friendship over money. Sarah was acting like that as if, being her friend and being at such a bad moment in life, it was my duty to help Emma, and by not accepting, I was turning into a selfish person. I cannot deny that I care for Emma, but at the same time, I should take care of myself, and $500 is not so small an amount for me, particularly when I have recently moved to a new apartment. I told Sarah that I had already helped Emma out a lot, but it seems she doesn't appreciate it, and continues to rely on me without doing anything in return. This has caused a real problem for me, because I can't keep bailing her out all the time. Sarah suggested that I should just let it go, considering that Emma has also been through a rough time, and maybe this is the last time I can help her sort things out. I am confused about whether I should help Emma or not. I have some savings, but I'm not sure if this will be the last time she asks for a loan and if she will return the money. So am I the AH here? OP is certainly not an AH because she has already helped Emma multiple times despite the fact that Emma has not paid any money back, and she didn't even consider this help from OP. Furthermore, all the financial problems of Emma are the result of her poor decisions. It's reasonable for OP to prioritize her own financial stability over an irresponsible and ungrateful friend. Emma's public post and blocking OP on social media show a lack of appreciation and maturity. OP offered to help Emma in other ways, like job searching and budgeting, but Emma's focus is solely on money. It's not OP's responsibility to continuously bail Emma out, especially when she refuses to be accountable for her own actions. As for AH score, I would give OP 0 out of 5 and OP's friend 1.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to another story where OP's friend cancels the road trip that they had agreed on 3 times, which infuriated OP, and she cuts ties with her friend after an argument. My best friend, Sophia, 29-year-old female, and I, 27-year-old female, recently planned a road trip, but she has cancelled the trip 3 times. The 3rd time she cancelled, I got angry and, after a heated argument with her, I cut off ties with her for taking our friendship for granted and treating me as an afterthought. Let me tell you the story in detail. I have known Sophia since elementary school, and we have lived in the same neighborhood since childhood. Around 6 months ago, she got engaged to her boyfriend, and now they are preparing for the wedding. I have been supportive throughout all this, and 2 months ago, I suggested having a road trip on Route 66, and she agreed. We agreed on those dates, and then marked them off in our diaries and calendars as promised. However, the night before we were to leave, Sophia called, saying she had to cancel because her fiancé's parents are coming into town, and she needed to be there to help entertain them. So I was a bit disappointed but understood. Things happen, and I knew she was under a lot of pressure with the wedding stuff. Fast forward a couple of weeks, we rescheduled again. I cleared my schedule, packed my bags, and was ready to go. But lo and behold, the night before the trip, she texted me saying that she wasn't feeling well and will have to cancel. This time, I was a bit frustrated because it seemed like she was not making our friendship a priority. Still, I said nothing and told her that we would reschedule the trip some other time. Then, we planned our trip for the last week. This time, I double-checked with her a week in advance. She reassured me, absolutely, I am free. I called her several times on the eve of the weekend, and all of them furnished the same reply. Yes, for sure. I'm so excited. Since I thought things were going to be different this time, I planned accordingly, booked a hotel, and requested leave from work, packed my stuff yet again. Then, the day before we were supposed to leave, she called me during the middle of the day, sounding all stressed out. I totally forgot, she said. I had a dress fitting this weekend, and can't reschedule because my wedding is only a few months away. By that time, I was furious. I didn't even know how to react. She had cancelled on me thrice, and every single time, it was for something that could have been better planned. I told her that she was being unfair to cancel on me all this while, especially when I had to go out of my way to make these plans work. I reminded her that I took off work, booked my room, actually rearranged life in general to spend some time with her, and she hadn't even remotely thought about all the effort I was putting into it. I said it's like our friendship is no longer a priority for her, and if indeed she didn't have time for me, then she should have told me flat and plain instead of keeping me hanging in midair. After remaining silent for a while, she began crying, saying that she didn't want to hurt me, but wedding planning, work, and family stuff were overwhelming her. She said that I was insensitive and asked me to try to see how difficult everything was for her at this time. She also said that I was not supportive and made her feel guilty for something that she had no control over. I was getting really angry. I told her that while she was busy, this wasn't just a one-time situation. This was the 3rd time that she had cancelled on me. I told her that friendships are a two-way street and that I was feeling taken for granted. After this, a heated argument started between us. I finally told her that if I was only an afterthought to her, I didn't want to have any relationship with her. I don't need this friendship. And then I hung up the call. She's been sending me a few texts that are kind of passive-aggressive, reminding me how friends are supposed to be there for each other, which I haven't responded to because I'm still stinging. I get that she's having the crap squeezed out of her with all this pressure, but I feel that I am the only one being asked to sacrifice for this friendship. Part of me is asking myself if I have been overreacting. and another part of me makes me feel I am right for finally standing up for myself. Some of our mutual friends have told me I need to cut her some slack since wedding planning is stressful, but I am still confused. So, am I the AH here? OP is not an AH, and her anger and frustration are justified. OP's friend has been canceling the trip repeatedly without considering the impact on OP. It seems that OP's friend has taken her for granted, which is not normal in any friendship. OP rightly said that friendship is a two-way street, so OP's anger is justified, but cutting ties would be too much. I would suggest opening communication because it is the key to successful relationships. As for the AH score, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP's friend deserves 1 out of 5 on the AH scale. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye bye. See you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.